Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Friday, and today was reserved for thrift shop hunting. So we piled into the minivan, and we went across Moose Bear Junction over to Teterboro, where we found a whole bunch of charity shops that had big walls of used books. And the neat thing was that the books had little colored tags on them, determining how much they cost. And the result of that trip, BookTube, was, as you may have guessed from that description, a titillating Teterboro TBR torture. I have roughly 150 books that I want to show you, so that would get started right away. The first two are paperbacks, in particular series. They've been reprinted a million times. I love these books, of course, but I love this particular paperback reprint series the most, and I got rid of all of mine. So I will slowly find them again. And they're the Hornblower saga. Forster's Hornblower saga, about Horatio Hornblower, a naval officer, the British naval officer during the Napoleonic Wars. They're really good. They're really, really good novels. They're solidly, seriously written. They don't have any of the playfulness that goes throughout the Patrick O'Brian novels, and they don't have any of the immersive lingo of the Patrick O'Brian novels. Instead, it's a completely different reading experience. I don't think many aficionados would argue that those two are the best by far of Napoleonic seafaring fiction. But for the Horatio Hornblower, these things were made by Pinnacle Books. I got Hornblower during the Crisis and Beat to Quarters, the famous Beat to Quarters Hornblower story. And the reason that I like these, this is a little gaudy, the Hornblower saga up at the top. Of course, the title of the book should be the easiest thing to see on the cover of the book. In this case, in both these cases, it's the hardest thing to see. But the thing I like about these is that the original artwork that Pinnacle commissioned for these paperbacks was so nice that they didn't deface it by putting anything on the back. Instead, the back is just a continuation. It's one big painting on both of them, and that's just lovely. I just think I really like that. It's a nice little grace touch. When it comes to somebody like the Hornblower novels, you are spoiled for editions and reprints, so you can be picky about little details. And in this case, it's a little detail that sells this for me. What I wouldn't give, I know that it existed, what I wouldn't give to find the box set of all of these with the artwork on the box, that would be just awesome. But there's only so much you can expect. so the next one, a children's classic. This is The Great Bunnicula. Sorry about I'll hold these up until I make sure you can see them. This is many of you will be familiar with this book. It's sold a gazillion copies. It's about a family they have a loving dog, they have a loving cat, and they adopt a rabbit, and the rabbit seems to have glowing red eyes and seems to have plans for world domination. And you're not sure until the very end of the book whether or not that might be true. Bunnicula is wonderful, and as soon as I saw it, I realized, oh, look at this. This one says, today vegetables, tomorrow the world. And as soon as I saw it, I realized, I mentioned on this channel that I regularly go and read to and sit with and talk with some kids at a pediatric intensive care unit. And I realized as soon as I saw this that we've never read it, they've never heard of it, and it's perfect for that. So, this one will get lots of love and use. Now, the next one is a UK trade paperback. I do love my UK trade paperbacks. This is a Matthew Shardlake novel. This is Hearthstone, starring the hunchback Tudor lawyer named Matthew Shardlake, a good man in very perilous times. This one, like a lot of the later Shardlake novels, is sort of taking place in the shadow of Queen Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's last wife, and the wife that intrigues me the most. I like that she seems to intrigue Sansom as well. And this book it's a great big thing. This was when people started to realize that these Shardlake books were going to be enormous now. They're not just by the numbers every year mystery novels that are 210 pages soaking wet. Instead, they're big, opulent, historical journeys. Fine by me. Absolutely fine by me. There's a good mystery in here. A little bit on the predictable side, but very well done. But this novel, if I remember correctly, takes place during Henry VIII's war on France, which is a big thing that, unfortunately, because Henry VIII married and killed some of his wives, there are histories of him that barely mention it. So it's a big deal. This next one is another book in a series. Another series that I love. I don't know that I've ever shown a copy on this channel. I don't think I've gotten a new one since I started this channel. And maybe I did. Maybe I got one. This is Princess Elizabeth's Spy. This is a Maggie Hope novel. Maggie Hope is a really talented codebreaker who gets recruited for the British spy service. And in this book, she has dreams about, the spy world daring do, all the adventure stories that she's heard all about. And her assignment is to go to Windsor Castle and tutor Princess Elizabeth, who will be Queen Elizabeth II. And she thinks that's going to be boring. And of course, because it's a Maggie Hope book, that isn't boring. There's a murder almost immediately. Then this next one, a trade paperback, a Penguin Orange Spine trade paperback, something that I got. I got the advance copy, and I sent it probably to one of you. I got the finished copy, and I sent it probably to one of you. I loved it. And all this time, I've been thinking that Brattle would provide, that sooner or later I would see either the hardcover or the trade paperback and quietly get a copy for myself. But instead, it was Teterboro Tag Sale, TBR Torture, that provided this. The Genius of Birds by Jennifer Ackerman. A wonderful, wonderful book. About the predictable, programmatic, not anything groundbreaking, all about bird natural history, bird behavior, centering on a few marquee species just to sort of clear the air. It's not meant to be in any way a scholarly tract. It's just a wonderful bird book. I strongly recommend it as a readable bird book. We're going to keep going. We're still going. We have lots and lots to do. As you can see over my shoulder, the Bean came with us today. And she was wonderful. She was in the car. She was in shops. She was meeting people. She was screaming at strangers. She was walking all around. And although she hates to admit it, it tuckered her out just a little. She's probably going to be low-key for another hour or two until her energy returns. But this next one, I'm pretty sure that we've seen this on this channel. I love it. I was amazed to see the shop where I saw it had 5 identical copies. They must have just got some sort of remainder shipment or a library overflow or something like that. This is by Nicholas Schulman, and it's Graven with Diamonds. This is the story of Thomas Wyatt, who he's in the literature anthologies as a poet of the Tudor era, but he and his family were also movers and shakers politically in the Tudor era and at court. And there are connections between the Wyatt family and Henry VIII's history, including, especially, Anne Boleyn, that make him fascinating reading. It's great ground for a historian to dig into. And this book does a really good job of doing that. I have a couple of other books on Wyatt. I think he's a fascinating figure. And I also think he's an absolutely terrific poet. In his case, I don't think we're talking about making allowances. I don't think in his case we're saying, well, for a courtier, he was a good poet. I think he's really arrestingly good poet anyway. Then we have an old hardcover. I'm kind of surprised, I must admit. One subject that keeps coming up during this trip is the ubiquity and the disgusting prevalence of those app-reading book dealers that just swarm over anywhere, even a children's charity sale that has 2 books. You'll suddenly find 10 of them there, all looking at their app to try and see if they can make a 2-cent profit on eBay. And because of that, I'm always a little bit surprised to find any old hardcovers. I just assume now that they are going to be swept up by those locust-like creatures. But this thing, I'm not saying that it has any value. It probably doesn't. But they grab them anyway. They grab them blind, and sift it out later. And this is by Darrett Ruckman. And it's Winthrop Boston. It's a story of what Boston was like in John Winthrop's day, but it's much more than that, too. I remember reading this book a long, long time ago and really liking its treatment of the Puritans, just in general, and also its biography of John Winthrop, who broke the ground in this area. This New England is still toils under his shadow in a lot of ways, and he's a fascinating figure. What prompted him to come to Massachusetts Bay? What prompted him to leave England? What prompted him to start a new life in a totally new world? Fascinating stuff. And this is a Boston book that I have liked. I've recommended it to people. And I haven't had a copy in forever. What it's doing in a tiny little charity shop in Vermont, I have no idea. But its journeys have now come to an end. It will rest with me. And this next one, if you're ready to continue with our scholarly books, this is... Can you make it out? This is Lover Avenged by J.R. Ward. This is a Black Dagger Brotherhood book, or Black Dagger Brotherhood has been stretching on now for 400 books, and they are pure, steamy sleaze. They are pure candy. So you have to be in the mood for that, but they're really good if you are. Unfortunately, I've heard fans of hers say that this isn't true. I've heard fans of hers say that you can jump in anywhere. I don't think that's even remotely true. I think you have to read this from the beginning. You have to be familiar with these people to get any of the Easter eggs, any of the emotional payoff that happens as in a novel as late as this. This is like, I don't even know. I'm not even sure this book will tell me, because the publisher started to want to downplay how many. Yeah, this is book number 7, and they've just gone on from there. They come out every year, but I don't have it, and believe it or not, I have read the series from the beginning, and I really like it. It's pure escapist junk. And believe it or not, there is a difference between books. I think this one is my favorite. So, and it has a Paul Marin cover. You can never go wrong with a Paul Marin cover. Now can you? This next one is from a couple of years ago. I requested it from Del Rey, and they ignored my request. And then I requested it again, and they ignored my request. And then once it was out, I requested it a third time, and they ignored my request. And then I said, well, could I request a paperback down the line? That also was ignored. So, and I know this is going to sound very Ponzi of me, but because the publisher refused to send me a free copy of the book, I didn't read it. That's very bad, I know. But I found a copy today, and I am curious. It's not like I'm dismissing the book just because. It's this. It's Jason Ho. It's 0 Hour, or Zero World. Look at that cover. That is neat. And that's an unusual cover, especially since his first trilogy, the Darwin Elevators trilogy that he did, it was very inventive. I liked it a lot. But it wasn't anything like this. This is a total tonal register, just a complete shift for the author. I always like that. I like it when authors do that, and we'll see if this is good. People did buzz it. It was talked about, and I confess, I took a copy out of the library and read a bit of it, but I want to read the whole thing. I want to see how good it is. Then this next one, it's huge. I got, of course, a few huge books this time around, and this one sold like griddle cakes in Japan when it came out. This is a translation. It's an enormous novel called Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa. And it's this is I don't know if you can make it out, but this is an extra wide hardcover. If you line these up like that one extends even further than that. It's an enormous story, a gigantic, rolling, epic adventure story about the main character, Musashi, who is vain and arrogant in his youth, and then masters himself. He masters his emotions, and he becomes a great warrior. A warrior who develops, and then perfects a method of fighting that is unique to him. And this went just viral. Now we would say it went viral in Japan when it first came out, and it was a huge hit. I don't know if this is still a huge hit. This may be. Like, for instance, the writer who writes the introduction to this English language translation, this is an English language translation by Charles Terry, and the author who writes the introduction calls this what many, many people did, including Publishers Weekly, which is the Gone with the Wind of Japan. And if that's true, then I have to wonder if that is still true. Because Gone with the Wind took off like wildfire here in America. It was a major movie. It was on everybody's tongue. Everybody knew what was in it. Everybody knew the characters. And not so anymore. Gone with the Wind was very much a period bestseller of its time. And I wonder if this is too. I know that once upon a time, people knew every detail of this huge story. I wonder if young Japanese readers have ever even heard of it. And or has it been adapted to manga or something like that? I don't know. I'll have to look into it and see. Then this next one wasn't exorbitant even by my standards. This whole day was exorbitant, but I do recommend it. It is really good, and the reason it's exorbitant is because it's probably the 5th biography of this person that I will have in my library. I don't know. I usually defend that by saying that if the person is interesting enough, then go ahead. Then that. There's no limit. There's no law. This is another biography of Benjamin Franklin, unfortunately. This is by Esmond Wright, and it's Franklin of Philadelphia. And it's more sourced, more heavily sourced, more scholarly than a lot of the Franklin biographies that I have. I remember really liking it, but thinking, it's daring for you to take such a colorful, romantic character as Benjamin Franklin and write such a steeply scholarly book about him. But I got that impression when I first read this book, which was when was this? 1986. So a little time has passed. I might have a different opinion now. So, and I'm always up to read about Franklin. I think he's fascinating. So I will read this and see if my opinions have changed, and if I suspect that my estimation of the book will have gone up. That my reading of it will go up, that it will be, I like it a lot more than I did originally. And if that's true, then I won't have any trouble putting it on my shelf with all the other Franklin books. Then the next book, we are in fact getting to the end, don't you worry. This was from a few years ago, just 2015, I think. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. So I highly recommend it to those of you who want to read current American history, relatively recent 20th century American history. This was... Okay, can you tell me? Copyright 2008. Okay, so Open Letters Monthly was still very young, and I probably wasn't getting advance copies, but I read it. I think I got an advance copy through the bookstore, and I read it. Really liked it. It's by G. Calvin Mackenzie and Robert Weisbrot, and it's called The Liberal Hour. And it's the explosion of liberal politics in the 1960s. And what explains that? It looked strange when the authors were writing this. It looks even more strange now. Their idea is that the country was unbelievably wealthy and was starting to flex its muscles and relax itself into a world that was, for it anyway, completely peaceful and completely prosperous, and that drove the impetus for social relief programs, for spending money on poor people, on sick people, on the future poor and sick people. Of course, that instinct is completely gone now, just completely gone. When the upshot of the 2020 presidential election settles down, regardless of who wins, we're going to see just further gutting of all the stuff that is being created and financed in this book. So it'll be a little bit of a pang to read it, but really interesting. And then this last one is also American politics, and it will not be a pang to read. It is amazing. Now, it is huge. It is, what have we got here? 800 pages long. And those 800 pages are fairly demanding. They're well written. It's a really well-crafted story, but you have to be paying attention. You have to be remembering names. The author's not going to do that for you. So it's a working 800 pages, but boy, oh boy, is it good. A classic of its kind. This is by Hedrick Smith, and it's The Power Game. Subtitle is simply How Washington Works. And if you are a U.S. political wonk, you will be able to recognize every single one of the people on that cover. Most people will be able to recognize Ronald Reagan. Most people will be able to recognize John F. Kennedy. Probably most Americans will recognize Jimmy Carter. Maybe in the Northeast, some people might recognize this gigantic dinosaur as Tip O'Neill. And not many people will recognize Howard Schultz, which is just the way he wanted it. And, of course, Henry Kissinger is the villain of 20th century American politics, so people will know him. He's in movies as a villain. He's in comic books as a villain. But this is just a sprawling history of American politics in the second half of the 20th century, written by a guy who struck a nerve. He had an unexpected, although we should have expected it, he had a bestseller with the Russians, a book called The Russians, in which he basically attempts to explain the Russian people to the American people. He said that he was trying to do a lot more than that, but that's basically what the book was trying to do. Explain one nuclear adversary to another. Humanize that adversary. And the book sold like crazy. Just went nuts. And this book essentially tries to explain Washington politics to Americans. So and it didn't do as well. Of course, it's infinitely intimidating, and the Russians was not. The Russians was much smaller and much more inviting. But boy, oh boy, Smith brought a lifetime of experience and insider knowledge to this thing. It's going to be, now that I have a copy, it's going to be a delight to reread it and revisit a lot of the ripped from the headline story details here that I was following in great detail when they were happening. They're all ancient history now, but I was following them at the time, and that this is the perfect monument to that. And there's absolutely no way that I can make a Steve pile out of these. I would, in fact, die. And it doesn't matter anyway, because none of you pay attention to any of these books, or to me. You're just cooing and cawing over Frida in the background. I got that all day long, everywhere we went. I would flash my $1 million smile with my wavy raven black hair and my A-frame shoulders and my dancer's hips and my come-hither eyes, and it was like I wasn't even there. People only paid attention to Frida. Anyway, that is your titillating Teterboro tag sale TBR. And I think it's big enough to stand on its own. So I don't think I will do a Friday reads, especially since most of the reading that I'm doing, today is reading that we will have seen on this channel already, because my reading today is adjunct to writing. I'm doing a huge amount of writing in these days, in this block of days. I told myself that the only way that I could actually rationalize going away from my little book room, going away, the only way I could rationalize that was if I made sure to get work done. Paying commission deadline work done while I'm gone. And I've been doing that. It's a really conducive atmosphere for that. But the reading that I've been doing has been mostly connected with that. So I'm going to let this video stand for that, unless maybe Mark and I might make a video or two later on today. But other than that, you're going to have to get by with one long TBR torture. But there'll be more tomorrow. I will keep making videos. So I'm gonna pile these on the floor and then tend to my sleepy bean. but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.